Hola. Felt compelled to film an update. Um, there are many things I feel as if they're stirring in the world internally in ways that we'll never be able to quite quantify, but we're all sensing and we know in our heart of hearts that this is not normal and that the world around us is basically fading into the abyss. Society as we know it, we've all been exposed to too much information, a lot of it superfluous, a lot of it meaningless, and a lot of it just flat out incorrect. But that brings me to the point of these false flags. I sense that in many people's reality, there are false flags that are orchestrated due to the manipulation of other people and their incentive in upholding this feigned normalcy that seems to just permeate our existences. And in my case, things are so odd and disjointed that it's weird to me. But at the same time, they're upheld so normally that it would be weird for me to even point out to an average person. It would really take somebody along my level of thinking, we're on the same wavelength in order to fully grasp it with each other. It's that type of phenomenon that we're forced to silently endure and balance while we're expected to uphold our optimum performance. And any little mistake that we could possibly make is scrutinized and picked apart. And we're definitely made aware of every fault that we have. It's the guilt and trauma cycle of life that is being instilled in people as a means of wearing them down to subdue them and control them. That's literally what we're dealing with. It's like a silent reign of terror internally that is orchestrated to attack and persecute people that are sentient, that are high vibration, that think for themselves, and are creative minded individuals. The powers that be don't really like the concept of high vibration, like minded people ever meeting or knowing each other. Hence, all the barriers in place. It's a difficult thing to even express to most people, but so many good things in this world are out of reach. They're impossible for good people. It's as if we live in a world where it's not only encouraged, but it's incentivized to be a steaming pile of shit who needs to cover their asses. It's not a good world for good people right now. I can't help but feel like as things tumble down and society learns from its mistakes, that people like me that are still standing are going to inherit this earth. Ultimately, I believe that it's going that direction. All signs point to it in my arena from what I'm sensing and detecting in the world. All the signs are there, all the symbolism you could ever derive. It seems as if I'm experiencing these synchronicities and these epiphanies to guide my ability to keep living through it. Because this, like I've mentioned many times, this is designed to torture intellectual people who think for themselves and put them in positions of limitations where they are stuck in a routine, a cycle that is toxic or is just unfulfilling enough for us to consider checking out. So every day above ground, when I wake up, I think it's a spiritual battle I must endure. There are going to be roadblocks. There are going to be things that discourage me. And there's going to be a lot of existential weirdness that boils to the surface at some point. We're all going to have a weird calamity in our lives, I believe. And it's just going to happen indiscriminately. And due to this communication barrier that I perceive, it's going to be difficult to reach to anybody that could possibly understand. We're all going to be fighting our invisible battles until we until we're able to communicate effectively. There's been a lot of things that have impeded our ability to even be the human beings that we want to be. I know that many of us are silently struggling and suffering because we're confined by our environment, which is typically manipulated to our detriment. It's the strangest concept, especially when all you see is people going through their routine mechanical motions being normal. It would make you certainly feel like the odd man out to point this type of phenomenon out because it would perhaps make you feel strange or make you feel like it would give them ammunition to use against you. But I just simply don't care anymore. I believe that the world is going in a direction we all know it is, and many of us just have to feign ignorance to things that we know to be true and act surprised. The jaded bitterness of the world is it's all internal, but it comes out in our behavior externally more and more, I believe. And I think we're going to see that there's going to be things that happen that indicate that we're not in Kansas anymore. And it's going to be hard to explain without pointing to a common denominator of some sort. So I would search and seek to find that common denominator no matter what. I mean, life is much easier to live if you view it as a test with constantly changing rules. And in many cases, the rules just simply don't matter. They're disregarded actively as logic is refused in this new reality. So keep that in mind. And the flow of good information, I mean, it's never really been in favor of the truth, but never more so than the present. People like me are constantly having our intelligence insulted by those around us and people in the world who are just committed to the notion that it's normal waking life, and that we must adhere to normal, while the most bizarre, abnormal shit just transpires, and we all just kind of let it ride. It's literally a simulation of life that we must endure and progress through, and expect that when the pause button is hit, that the simulation will resume and all the pieces have been moved around. So we're going to be looking at some breaks in society, I believe, coming up, and it's going to be a hard thing to even tolerate because none of us ever talked about it. We never really got our true feelings out. We've just had to endure, and it's been a pitiful thing to sense and witness. With all the emphasis on normal waking life and the surface level, you really got to reach deep for that better sort of weird from internally, or from the inside. I mean, there's a lot I've learned about myself and the nature of life and who I am as a person during this time period of persecution and isolation and interference. It's caused me to dig deep and be way okay with my own self awareness and to not let it scare me, but to let it inspire me to find creative ways to keep living. Because this is not meant to be intellectually stimulating, it's meant to be detrimentally mind numbing to the point where we're just like, fuck this reality, I'm out. But I can't really do that. I'm going to have to keep enduring in hopes that one day I can maybe speak to another human being tangibly or even in person about how we feel. Because I know this is affecting other people. This isn't just me. This is a big, big ordeal and phenomenon that's occurring. So just keep in mind that even though many of us, like me, have been in positions where we favor our solitude or independence from other people, I've let it inspire me to try to do my best work. I've tried to find an outlet creatively and use it and try to make it a meaningful thing because it's a meaningless world where people like us are just completely worn down and we're left to our own devices. But thankfully, if you're like me, you're creative and you can find a way because I think society is set to endure a consciousness shift that is unavoidable. It's just going to be so peppered in and indiscriminate that the bottom line will be hard to connect, but hopefully not impossible. But it's better to take your time to cultivate a mindset because most people are just busy living life. They're not thinking about what life means and where it's going. They're just going through those mechanical motions until they can't anymore, and it's more of a static thing. Just use your mind. The universe wants us stuck in quicksand, awaiting nothing good, surrounded by only the wrong people during distressing time periods where we feel as if we have no outlet. So we need to just acknowledge that going in, that we're going to be in unfavorable circumstances, especially if you're like me. Then you're not going to be around the ideal people, the right or the ideal things. I go into life knowing that my opportunities are being compromised and interfered with, and that's a difficult pill to swallow. But I feel as if I've adapted to this constant level of disappointment in the world to the point where I can just exist within it. And it's not as big of a deal to me as other people, perhaps, but I've sensed many people are being harmed and being interfered with, and it's a tragic thing. Much of this experience has been limited and terrible, but it's going to gradually become horrifically tragic for many people who just simply never thought about the gravity of what they may have taken a part in. They're doing each little piece adds up to a big picture in my mind. And active measures have been taken to prohibit productive ideas from being actualized or spoken about, but try to constantly access your own autonomy and ability to express yourself in a meaningful way. Allow yourself to be divinely inspired, that sort of thing. And another thing to keep in mind, too, is that despite the lack of cues from your environment, due to this hive mind mentality that is spreading, I believe I sense throughout the world, we must form strength in numbers and try to point to this event. If you're experiencing it like I am on any level, then we need to be able to point to it with people who agree. And that's going to be a hard thing to facilitate due to all the constant manipulation, the barriers that we must endure. But keep pressing on in that good fighting to try to exchange good information to each other. It's important. And of course, always remember that this is a real event. This is all happening, but it's from within. Like many of us are just in our solo mode, so to speak, enduring this type of thing, realizing that it's not normal life, but we've got to uphold what we have to. But at a certain point, we've got to put our foot down and let it be known that we know what's going on and we're not going to tolerate it forever. Because I think many people are going to be driven and motivated once real world things happen to them that they know are caused by this, but maybe can't exactly point to precisely. But acknowledging this occurrence for its spiritual value, it does inadvertently bring up the injustices and the hypocrisy and the low down dirty shame of it. So it in essence, if you acknowledge the light, then you must acknowledge the darkness. And they don't want you to. The enemy does not want you to acknowledge anything that happened detrimental. It's a toxic false positivity that in many cases we're just forced to endure. You know what I mean? It's, you can't go to work and be doom and gloom, talk about how you feel. It doesn't work like that. It's just so hard to find peace and comfort from other human beings that you gotta be able to attain it yourself and harvest it and cultivate it. Cultivate a mindset and be different. If not with other people, then on a personal level. I feel as if there's much healing and therapy that's going to be needed for people who have been affected, whose ways of life have been forever changed, that they haven't been able to relate to other people. So just try to network. People could be more understanding than you think, but don't be surprised due to the level of manipulation and misinformation in the world, period, if people don't get what wavelength you're on. I've had to accept that people might think I'm a little bit cuckoo for some of the shit I pointed out, but the truth is that the truth is stranger than fiction ever could be. So just remember, magical things happen all the time that get unobserved. Tragic things happen all the time that get unobserved. Just try to find that middle ground and keep it moving. Peace.